Yep. I did 750 Super Sport. And I think the reason for that is the year prior I rode GSXR 750 and GSXR 1100. And so the Cowie kind of fell in our lap. I think there was a couple connections there that could be met, and the new Cowie was great. And I went into it, you guys. Like I wanted to do the best I could, and back then it was great. You could double dip because there was a championship within a championship. There was a championship called Top Expert, and there was a lot of money in Top Expert, and there was a lot of money in the 750 Super Sport class too. So, like a win for me back then, I mean, a win for me back then was probably close to 15 or 20 grand.
No shit.
Whoa.
Yeah, because um, it was funny during COVID. I started cleaning everything out, and I found this. I got to show it to you guys. I found this old contingency sheet because they'd hand them to you at the beginning of every race weekend, of every company on there that was paying contingency.
Wow.
And so there was a Top Expert championship. So I won the Top Expert championship that year, and I finished second overall, I think, to Scott in 750 Super Sport. But it was like a race within a race. So even if you finished third, I was on the podium. If I was first Top Expert, I'd get paid on both. So it was great. And then Scott was like dominant. And I think Scott in 1991 and up to the time I beat him, he'd never lost in Super Sport. He'd won 2 championships, and he did that. And he was literally, back then for me, Scott was, this is probably part of my problem too as a racer. I idolized the guy. Like I thought Scott Russell was like the best. And so racing against him was always super intimidating for me. And at Brainerd, I think it got to the point where he was winning these races by so much that he probably wasn't taking things as seriously. He was more focused on Superbike. Because you got to remember, it was just a year later he won the World Superbike Championship, I think, so in '93. And that day at Brainerd, I still remember it. And this is again, you asked me a question about my dad. I remember just do what you got to do. Don't worry about what other people are doing, and hit your marks and stuff. And I led the race. I had a great teammate back then named Fritz Kling. Fritz was 6 foot. He's like you, Corey. He's like 6'2". The nicest guy you ever met, and perfect teammate for me. Just a super guy. And him and I were out front leading, and I kept on kind of waiting, like Scott's gonna come, Then 6, 7, 8 laps in, I'm like, why am I still leading this race? And then it had gone to like +3. So, and I knew it was Fritz. And then it went +2, and I went, it's not Fritz anymore, And then going into the last lap, I had like a 1 second lead, and I'm like, just hit your marks. Don't even think about them. Hit your marks, hit your marks, hit your marks. And I ended up winning. And it was as big a shock to me as it was to anybody else. I can tell you that. And I still have a photo of myself because I didn't know how to celebrate. I didn't know how to do a wheelie. I didn't know how to like stand on my pegs and hold my hands in the air like I used to see Kevin Schwan. I didn't know how to do any of that. So there's a picture of me that I have at my house of me standing on my pegs, holding onto the throttle and waving to the crowd because I didn't know what to do. I still have it. Keeps me grounded. And then the very next weekend we went to Loudon, New Hampshire. We had 3 race weekends back to back to back back then. We'd go from Brainerd to New Hampshire to Road America. And I was leading at New Hampshire, and he punted me. And I remember I was like 6th, and I came back through the field, and I finished second. Like I got on the podium, and I'm like, I'm gonna win next week. I'm gonna win, and I beat him the next weekend at Road America too. So those 2 races really put me on the map. That's when I got my first invite to Suzuka after that, the 8-hour. Like I was a kid.
How old were you?
What was 20, 21.
Wow.
I was like, what just happened? Like all of a sudden it was like a thing, and it was, it's incredible to think about because I still look back at what Scott, there's guys that have really influenced me along the way that I've really looked up to. And Scott was definitely one of them.
When he did that, would that kind of change that though? Like as far as looking up to him anymore, was it kind of
when he punted me, it pissed me off. Yeah. I mean, I remember when it happened, and I got the sorry Jay, and all that, and I'm like, I'm winning next week at Road America, and then when I did that, there was a couple things that were really great about that because of course everybody thought we were cheating, and it started pouring rain in Tech, and back then Tech wasn't in a building; it was under like these little tents, and it's pouring rain, and I remember there was like a AMA advisory board meeting that night. And Rob Muzzy had to be at that, and he wouldn't leave Tech because he wanted to know why my bikes were what they were. And there was another reason behind that. When we started at Daytona, I was on Muzzy exhausts. That's what I was on. And Lang Hindle came in, Hindle Exhaust, the president of Hindle. he came in and offered us a deal at Daytona and said, "Can I take your bikes to the dyno tonight? And if so, we'd like to do a deal with you." So we showed up with Hindle exhaust on our bikes, and Muzzy was pissed.
I bet.
And so, 5 races later, I won 2 out of the 5 rounds, and he wasn't really happy about it. So it was kind of fun for me back then.